Most of us know that tyres are some of the most important things on your bike, but with so many options now available, how do you know which ones are any good? Well, to answer that question, we recently took 8 of the latest high-end road tubeless tyres to the lab at the Silverstone Sports Engineering Hub to find out how much rolling resistance each one produces. But that's not all. After that, we also performed a bucket load of real-world testing too, including installation, tubeless setup and test rides on our local roads. And in this video, we are going to reveal which tyres are the fastest and which ones aren't all they're cracked up to be. But before I tell you which tyres you should be putting on your bike, subscribe to our channel if you value independent buying advice like this. Let's start with our rolling resistance testing. Before we get into which tyres we tested and the results, let's just run through how this kind of testing works. Now, the Silverstone lab has a bicycle-specific rolling resistance rig which uses an oversized motor-driven roller to rotate a wheel. This wheel has a vertical mass applied which simulates a rider's weight deforming the tyre, and the machine uses a torque meter to measure the power required to turn the roller at a given speed with and without a tyre contacting it. All else being equal, a tyre that loses fewer watts to rolling resistance should be faster in the real world, as it means that more of the energy that you put through the pedals goes into driving the bike forward. For each tyre tested, we mounted it to the same Hunt carbon wheel with a latex inner tube. Now, you might be wondering why we used an inner tube instead of setting the tyres up tubeless as they're designed to be used. Well, that's a very fair question, but there are 3 key reasons we opted to do it like this. Firstly, as many of you know, when you set up tyres tubeless with sealant, you typically need to give them time to form an airtight seal. Time which we didn't have, as the longer the test takes, the more money it costs. It also helped us prevent air retention from being a variable, which is important as maintaining a consistent tyre pressure for the duration of each test is key to getting good results. And lastly, it also helps save a lot of mess and wasted sealant. Obviously, we did our research on this topic before the test, and it turns out that a latex inner tube has roughly the same rolling resistance as 20 millilitres of tubeless sealant, so it wouldn't have affected the results. Once on the rims, we pumped each tyre up to 80 psi or 5.5 bar for our European friends, and we used a contact packed load of 40 kilograms and a test speed of 30 kilometers per hour. As mentioned at the start of the video, we tested 8 tyres in total. Now, all of them are top of the range all-round models designed for fast road riding, and you'll likely have seen many of them being used at the biggest races in the World Tour this year. Now, to save you needing to listen to a long and boring list, the names of the tyres that we tested are going to flash up on screen right now. Before you jump into the comments, we know there are technically faster tyres available, such as the time trial specific models many brands now offer. However, we didn't pick those for this test as they're mostly too delicate for anything other than short races on good roads. For all the tyres that we did test, we opted for a size 700x28C, with the exception of the Challenge Criterium RS, for which we selected the closest available size, a 700x27C. We chose the 28C size because we feel that this represents a sweet spot for the average road rider as things stand, offering a good balance between speed, weight, grip and comfort. Now, whether wider tyres are actually faster than narrow ones in the real world has been a hotly debated topic in recent years, but as we saw at this year's Tour de France, the answer isn't really a simple yes or no. It usually depends on a lot of different factors. Crucially though, most modern road bikes can accommodate 28C tyres, and many of the best road wheels are now optimised for it too. So that's why we chose that size. But if you prefer to run a different tyre size on your bike, that is absolutely fine. So, what were the results? Well, according to our data from the Silverstone test, the most efficient tyre in the group was, drumroll please, the new Pirelli P0 Race TLR, which required just 11.86 watts per tyre to overcome rolling resistance. In contrast, the least efficient tyre on test was the Vittoria Corsa Pro TLR, which required 16.68 watts per tyre to overcome rolling resistance. To save you doing the maths, that's 4.82 watts per tyre more than the Pirelli, or 9.64 watts for a pair of tyres. And that's the difference between the best and worst we tested then. But what about the rest? Well, here are the full results of our Silverstone test on screen now. As you can see, everything else was actually a much closer match for the Pirelli, ranging from 14.32 watts for the Specialized S-Works Turbo 2BR down to 12.08 watts for the Shorby Pro 1T LE. Is rolling resistance all that matters though? If you were paying attention at the start of the video, you might remember that I also said we did a load of real-world testing following the Silverstone test. Now, we did this because we feel that it's important not to put too much emphasis on the rolling resistance results alone. It definitely is important, otherwise we wouldn't have bothered doing it, but it isn't the only thing that matters when you're riding a bike in the real world. Time trial specific tyres such as the Continental GP5000 TTTR or Vittoria Corsa Speed, for example, offer exceptionally low rolling resistance, likely outstripping any tyre in this test. But unless you enjoy fixing punctures and have deep pockets to cope with how quickly those wear out, then they're likely to disappoint you in terms of all-round performance. It's also worth noting that the spread between the top 7 tyres that we tested was less than 2.5 watts per tyre, which for most of us would basically be impossible to detect whilst riding in the real world. And again, just to be clear, I'm not saying that 2.5 watts doesn't matter, just that there are other factors to consider as well. Now for tubeless tyres especially, one of the big things to consider is how easy, or otherwise, a tyre is first to put on a rim and 2, set it up tubeless. The Challenge Criterium RS, for example, was an absolute pig. Not only were they extremely tight fit on the Hunt rims that we use for testing, but getting the beads to pop up onto the rim shelf was very difficult. In the end, no matter how many tricks I tried, it simply wasn't possible to get the beads to seat with a standard track pump, so I had to resort to using a dedicated tubeless inflator. It's a shame really, as in terms of rolling resistance it tested very well. It was just fractions of a watt behind the Pirelli, for example. Once you've got them on your bike, the ride quality is also excellent. They have a super supple 350 TPI casing and they grip the road really well. But would I recommend them over most of the other tyres we tested, which are maybe a watt or so less efficient but aren't such a pain to set up? Definitely not. And that's mainly because all of the tyres in this group are premium models, and frankly, providing you get your tyre pressures right, all of them have good ride quality, excellent grip and supple casings. There are detectable differences between them of course, and I've no doubt that everyone has their favourite, but all of these tyres are, or could be, raced at the highest level. Interestingly, though it was one of the slower tyres in the group, I was personally really impressed by the Specialized S-Works Turbo 2BR. Nominally, it's a bit more of a tougher, cobbled classics tyre, but I actually found it felt great on the road. It also happens to be a little bit cheaper than some of the other tyres too, which always helps. In terms of tyres that we think were the best overall, it's obviously hard to overlook the Pirelli P0 Race TLR. As well as class-leading rolling resistance, my colleague Ash Quinlan, who helped me out with the real-world testing, said that the ride quality was excellent and they were also easy to install and set up. The only downsides are that they're a little heavier than average and they weren't quite as wide as expected when inflated, but overall they were very impressive. I was also really pleased to see how well the Shorby Pro 1 did in the Silverstone test. It's a tyre which myself and many here at BikeRadar have lots of experience with and little to complain about, so to learn that it's still very competitive in terms of rolling resistance was great to see. At the opposite end of the spectrum though, I think we were all a little bit disappointed with the Vittoria Corsa Pro TLR. Now this is a tyre which has had loads of success on the pro circuit since it launched, so we were naturally expecting pretty good results from it. And on the one hand, there was a lot that we liked. Rolling resistance aside, it was fantastic. It has incredible ride feel, excellent grip, and was really easy to set up. And personally, I also think those classic tan sidewalls look absolutely incredible on my Giant TCR. Sadly though, we just couldn't overlook the fact that it performed so much worse than everything else in our lab test, especially when they cost £90 or $100 per tyre. It is worth saying that given the disconnect between the kind of races the Corsa Pro TLR has been used to win and the rolling resistance results that we got at Silverstone, we did wonder if something had gone wrong with the testing. But I queried it with the Silverstone engineers during the test and they double checked everything and couldn't find any issues. Of course, while we did everything we could to ensure a fair test, it is possible that we just happened to test a particularly bad sample. But I personally brought the tyres we tested home from Italy from the original product launch with Vittoria, and it was brand new out of the box for the day at Silverstone. All that said, it's worth remembering that in the grand scheme of things, nearly all of the tyres we tested were very closely matched. There are undoubtedly some small differences here and there, but if you've already got a set of these tyres, should you take them off your bike, throw them straight in the bin and rush out to get a set of the Pirellis? Probably not. Likewise, if you've got a favourite tyre because you love the way it rides, how it grips, or it's just been exceptionally reliable for you, then that's also not something to overlook. Confidence is a really big thing with tyres, and if you have something that you like, then it's absolutely fine to stick with what you know. At the end of the day, unless you're racing, the small differences in performance that we found at our Silverstone test aren't going to matter as much day to day as other characteristics such as ease of setup, cost, and so on. But what do you think? Do you have a favourite tyre for your road bike? Do you look for the fastest tyres that money can buy, or do you prefer something with a bit more puncture protection? As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and if you like this video, then why not watch this one about which tyre width is fastest.